Xcom Enemy Unknown is a turn-based tactical game made by Firaxis, where you play as a commander attempting to stop aliens from abducting people from around the world. Now, these aren't the type of aliens you want to play some Techno Simon Says with people. No, they want to do some serious probing. But luckily Earth has formed a secret organization called Xcom, which is short for Extraterrestrial Combat, though pretend there isn't an E at the start. Xcom have gathered an elite group of soldiers from around the world to stop these aliens, though it isn't going to be easy as the aliens have you outmatched in weapons, abilities and technology. And most of the game you'll be reacting to the aliens' attacks rather than taking them on directly. Oh, and I forgot to mention that the soldiers you could have invested a large amount of time and resources training over the course of the game, they can die permanently. So it's going to be an uphill battle, but if you stick with it, you'll beat the aliens up so bad they'll want to phone home. Now, this isn't the first XCOM game, as this is actually a kind of remake of the original from all the way back in 1994, and that game was very highly regarded as one of the best strategy games of the era, though over the years the IP traded hands to lots of different companies, until eventually 2K Games got hold of it, where Firaxis, who's owned by 2K Games, had some fans of the original game that really wanted to make a new XCOM. They had experience making the Civilization series, which is one of the most popular strategy games out there, but their first couple of attempts to make a prototype for XCOM, while looking pretty cool, didn't feel great to play, and there were problems deciding whether to make the game real-time or turn-based. Then later problems with the UI influencing gameplay too much, which overcomplicated things. Though after years of trial and error, they started to figure out what felt good to play, while still adding some new things to the old XCOM formula but not dumbing it down too much, like including a cover mechanic and making the action a little more cinematic at points, with a dynamic camera that would highlight some action when it occurred during combat. Firaxis were a little nervous about launching a tactical game like this since, at the time, the gaming industry was very focused on making more action-heavy types of games. I mean, even the lead designer Jake Solomon helped try to get the pre-order numbers up himself in stores.
It's like chess with big guns against aliens, which isn't like chess at all when I think about it. You're 18, right? No? Oh, okay. Your soldiers are out there, they're dying from decisions you've made, you're crying, you feel terrible about yourself. Sound like a good time? It's not it's right. You know, it's this. And then it's this.
Though it turns out they didn't need to worry, as when the game came out it did pretty well in sales and even won a few Game of the Year awards. So after launching the game, Firaxis was riding pretty high. And a year later released an expansion for the game called Xcom Enemy Within, which added more features, missions, and maps to the game, which all fit in quite nicely with the original release. It makes me miss the days when we used to get substantial expansions for games like this, instead of, well, you know, the microtransaction hell we find ourselves in today. Okay, but before I go on a tangent about that, let's chat a bit about how the game runs. The game has some issues which you can reduce but not entirely get rid of. Like when I played it on PS3 originally, if you had too many saves it would make the loading times terrible. You could go make a cup of coffee and come back and the game would still be loading. I was hoping the issues would be less on PC, but it has some of its own problems. Like the game would crash a fair bit, though I did manage to reduce this a bit by running in windowed mode, though it did happen enough to be annoying. Also I ran into an issue where I thought my game saves were not being saved, but it turns out that actually when the game saves in a month with 31 days, at the end of that month the date format for the saves resets to what the USA uses, which is month, day, year, instead of how most of the rest of the world works, which is day, month, year. So all these saves are there, they're just at the bottom of the list. You can sort of fix this by moving the older saves to another folder on your PC, and the new ones will go to the top. Why do Americans use this date format? I think it's just to torture the rest of the world, because they can. At least the game does mostly okay with visuals. It's not going for a gritty realistic look like most military games are. The best way I could describe it is maybe a Saturday morning cartoon version of Gears of War. The reason the game looks like it does is, well, apart from it being on Unreal Engine 3, which does explain a little why the soldiers look a little similar to those in Gears of War, was because when developing the game, Firaxis tried to stay within a polygon limit that they thought they might not be able to go over, and the in-game characters they thought looked like action figures grew on them over time, and so they decided to go with it. Other things that influenced the game's looks were UFO lore and pop culture, you know, like little grey aliens and flying saucers. Even some stuff outside aliens like Slender Man had some influence on a few enemies. As you play through the game, you'll notice that the enemies come in a wide array of shapes and sizes, which keeps things interesting as you're never quite sure what horrible alien thing you'll run into in your next mission. What also helps with this is the music, which is good at setting up the tone for each part of the game. From getting your soldiers ready and suited up and then briefed about the mission they're about to go on, to the quieter but tense start of each mission where you're not quite sure what creatures could be waiting for you around each corner, and then back to action as your soldiers engage in a deadly shootout with aliens. Though as I played the game, for some reason I started getting Deus Ex Human Revolution vibes as I played, but I found out why. It turns out Michael McCain was the composer for both games, which, like the work he did in that game, is doing a pretty good job with the music in this one. All the tracks are done really well. I mean, there is a slightly cheesy track when you look at the memorial wall back at base for all the soldiers you lost, which you may lose quite a few while playing. The game even encourages you to grow attached to these soldiers by letting you customize customize them, from different hairstyles to even how they talk. You can even give them nicknames. They'll even have their own kind of story arc as you go through the game, which I'll get into later. It's fun making them all fairly different and unique from each other. Or you can get a special ops kind of vibe going where everyone takes their job super seriously. No clowning around. It's all up to you. Like, I tend to try and get a roster of mostly South Africans going, but by doing that there's a higher chance that I'll lose more of them as I play through, which means I need to get some explosive revenge against some aliens. See, it gets you invested in the game. The customization isn't limited to just the soldiers, so you can customize the game a fair bit too, which isn't just your run-of-the-mill difficulty options. In addition to those, there are second wave options, which are basically like modifiers for the game. For your standard options, there's a normal difficulty if you want a challenging but not too intense go through the game. Or there's the impossible difficulty if you want to torture yourself. Then there's stuff that'll keep multiple playthroughs interesting. Like Iron Man mode, which gives you one save and updates it automatically. So all your choices are permanent. If you mess up, there's no going back to a nice previous save. But the devs did also cater to those who like to partake of the dark arts of save scumming, with a second wave option that if you enable it will make it so if you try again you might get a different result in combat. There are a ton more which make the game pretty random if you're into that sort of thing, though the game can already feel like RNG isn't your friend before enabling any of these options. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All these options are pretty great as you can make the game how you want to play it, and if you finish the game you get more second wave options for future playthroughs, which can increase the difficulty of the game significantly if you wanted to. Also, if you can't get enough for this game, there's some fairly cool mods out there for it. Probably the best of which is the Long War mod, which adds a massive amount to the game, and it makes some significant gameplay changes to lengthen it substantially. Like, the actual XCOM developers have been quoted as saying the base game, which can take you about 30 hours, is like a tutorial for the Long War mod. That's how big it is. On a tangent, the guys who made the Long War mod for XCOM games have enough experience now that they're making their own game called Terror Invicta, which is basically a 4X grand strategy version of XCOM that looks like it has some crazy depth. These guys like to play the long game, if you know what I mean. Anyway, before I get sidetracked by that, let's get into the gameplay of XCOM. If you've never played a game like XCOM, it might seem like a little much to take in, but it's not too complicated. You can break it down into two parts, one being the tactical side, which is you as a commander give soldiers orders during battle to take certain actions like shoot aliens or take cover, or use a rocket on the scary ones before they get too close. But where it gets good is where you have to take into account your positioning and the abilities your soldiers have to survive the various battles with the aliens, because the game puts you in situations where there isn't always going to be a perfect move, which is going to force you to make some tough choices that may or may not, depending on your RNG, get your soldiers killed. This gets amped up because the more missions you take your soldiers on, the better they get at taking on aliens, which gives them a better chance of surviving. Though it takes time to build them up, so if you have a bad mission and lose a veteran, it hurts, because now your squad of soldiers is weaker and you need to train up a new soldier to replace the one you lost. But this is where the second part of the game comes in, which is the more strategic side of the game, where you make decisions back at home base to get better equipment and weapons for your soldiers, to give them a better chance to survive out on missions. Though this also has its challenges as you don't have infinite supplies of money and resources. At the beginning of the game, your home base is understaffed and lacking facilities that you need to support your soldiers long term. Like, you're going to start the game with interceptors that can barely take on UFOs, which you're going to need to improve a lot to stop attacks. But there are lots of other areas at home base that need attention and resources too. So again, you need to make some tough choices, like do you do research on better weapons or armor first? Do you take on missions to get more engineers or scientists? Because you need scientists to research the cool tech you find out on missions to be able to use it, and find out more about the aliens. But also you need engineers to build the new facilities that will help progress the story, and help build new equipment and upgrades. While doing all of that, you need to keep the members of the council, which are major nations of the world, from freaking out to the point they stop supporting XCOM with much needed money and staff, which can be a challenge as multiple countries will freak out at the same time and you can't help them all. So the core gameplay becomes balancing both the tactical and strategic sides of the game, to make progress without losing too many soldiers and supporting countries. This might sound like a lot, but when you first play the game, the tutorials will guide you in the right direction, so you're not likely to mess up too badly. What the game does well is, if you're new to this sort of setup, is keep you on your toes, and feeling like you're just keeping up with the aliens. Because as you go on more missions, more challenges keep getting thrown your way, with new, tougher aliens, and just feeling like you're barely getting enough resources to keep going. This will obviously make you want to play more carefully, but this is where a bit of a problem with the gameplay on the tactical side comes in. This problem is Overwatch creep, which no, isn't a weirdo who plays Overwatch, though those do probably exist somewhere. It actually refers to a mechanic in the game where instead of moving a large distance on your turn with a soldier, you can move them a little and then use an ability called Overwatch, where if an enemy moves an eyesight of that soldier, they take a shot at them. It is the safest and probably the most logical way to play the game, but it also makes the game boring if you do it too much. Though with the release of the expansion Xcom Enemy Within, Firaxis helped fix this a bit, but not completely, as there will be Overwatch creep in the late game, even with this expansion. They added this stuff called Meld to the combat map, which is a very useful resource. That expires if you don't get to it quick enough, so it forces you to take risks, which in my opinion makes the game more enjoyable. But what is this Meld stuff and why is it so valuable? Well, because it lets you do stuff like this.
Ready to engage. Getting in close.
Fun, right? And apart from building super mech soldiers who remind me of little dreadnoughts from 40k, you can also give some of your troops some gene modifications. They can both increase their survivability and how likely they are to hit enemies. Because you might need it, as this game is fairly notorious for the spectacular misses your troops can do. Like, I sometimes wonder if these soldiers got shooting tips from stormtroopers or something. It's a not so gentle reminder that a high percentage isn't a 100% chance, which I'll admit a little begrudgingly, it adds some drama to the action in the game. As sometimes RNG will be against you, and other times RNG Jesus will smile upon you and save you from what look like a really bad situation. Another thing that Xcom Enemy Within expansion added was Exalt, which is basically the evil version of Xcom, as instead of fighting the aliens, they're trying to help them. So not only are you fighting the aliens, you're also fighting another organization that's trying to undermine you, because they think they can use the alien experiments on humans to eventually get powerful enough to take over the world. They do stuff like stealing funds, research, and making countries panic more than normal. Also, they use similar tactics to your soldiers in combat, and some of their equipment even looks cooler than yours. But on the plus side, if you beat them in a mission, you get to keep their cooler looking guns, and either sell them or equip them on your soldiers. At the start of the game they'll be a problem, but as you get to the mid game you'll slowly start pulling ahead of them, and also eventually figure out where their secret base is so you can take them out completely, which is a nice kind of side quest as you're trying to take on the aliens. Exalt would have been an interesting faction to play as in a spin-off game, where instead of playing as Xcom you play as an Exalt trying to help the aliens and stop Xcom, though Firaxis seem to have their own ideas for a spin-off series. Anyway, back to gameplay. At the start of the game it'll be hard going, though if you play well enough to keep your soldiers alive, while making some good long-term choices back at home base, you'll get rewarded with advanced weapons and armor that'll start to get you slowly ahead of the aliens, and as the story progresses you'll be able to take the fight to them. Also, your soldiers can specialize in certain roles like assault, support, and sniper, which when you max out the level of colonel they become very powerful with the right skill choice, like the sniper class, which is probably the most overpowered in the game. Not only are they more likely to do critical damage, but if you give them a skill like double tap, which lets them shoot twice on one turn, they can be a massive damage dealer by the end of the game, which you're gonna need as the health bars on late game enemies can be terrifying, and that's not including the massive amount of damage they can do too, as remember the aliens are going to get tougher the further you get into the story, which I should chat a bit about. One of the cool things about XCOM is, apart from that main story with the alien invasion, which is done fairly well and I'll get into in a bit, are these kind of small stories that naturally occur around your soldiers as you play it. Without any dialogue or linear storytelling in the game, it kind of just happens as you play, almost without you noticing at first. Like, you'll start to have favorite soldiers that you try and take on every mission because they did well in that last mission, or you'll have that one rookie that just keeps missing every shot early in the game. That'll frustrate the hell out of you, but you stick with them and they later on become one of your best soldiers. It's really enjoyable seeing your troops get better over the course of the game and becoming a squad of badasses. Also at the same time, it really stings when you lose one of them. Now while I chat about the main story, I'm also going to talk a little bit about this one soldier called Garcia, aka Drifter, who became almost the chosen one protagonist of my game, which I didn't intend for him to be, as I was actually trying to make one of my South African soldiers into a super soldier, but it just kind of happened. Anyway, so the game starts off with an alien attack on a city which activates XCOM into action. A group of countries called the Council of Nations has put you in charge of XCOM to defend the Earth, and try to find out why these aliens are attacking and stop them, but they're only going to keep supporting you if you deliver results, which they'll remind you about every month, so no stress.
Remember, we will be watching.
You'll have a bit of a tough time at the start as the aliens have a better tech than you and they can actually aim, though you start making a little progress by doing autopsies on aliens your soldiers kill to find out what makes them tick. Also, it helps with researching better gear. Dr. Valen will also remind you on missions not to blow up the aliens, as you can recover tech from the bodies.
Commander, you may want to instruct your men to exercise restraint when using explosives.
But I wanted to survive these early missions, so I was pretty much... As you make a bit more progress, you'll find out the aliens are abducting people for unknown reasons. In addition, you'll find out these aliens have been modified both genetically and with cybernetics, with the purpose of being foot soldiers for probably a yet unseen alien leader. But that's all you're going to find out by just collecting dead bodies. So your team at XCOM, after a slightly heated debate, suggests catching one of the aliens alive. Even though it's going to be dangerous, it's the only way to find out more, because at this moment XCOM basically knows nothing about why the aliens are doing this. An opportunity comes up to catch an alien when you shoot down a UFO, and launch an attack on a crash site where you can capture an alien and bring it back to base, where Dr. Valen has some creative ways to get some information out of it.
Dr. Valen's interrogation technique certainly is efficient. You'd never know it by looking at her, but that woman is an alien's worst nightmare.
But while you've gotten a little taste of success, the aliens start increasing their attacks around the world. And then Exalt started making moves against XCOM, and you'll never guess where they struck first.
Oh no, you didn't!
To counter Exalt, you need to send an undercover operative, which is just one of your soldiers who's armed with just a pistol, into a country to basically expose an Exalt cell operating there. And after a while you need to send an entire squad to finish up the mission as Exalt tried to stop the operative. So I decided to send my top sniper at the time, which was Garcia, aka Drifter, since he's the least likely to miss with just a pistol, and the rest of my troops, let's just say, needed more practice. After a bit of time, the signal to help Drifter finish the mission came up, and I gladly removed Exalt from the country.
Goodbye.
While all that was going on, Dr. Volin made a request to capture a specific alien called an Outsider, who are the pilots of the UFOs and might have some leads on what the aliens are up to. After you manage to capture one, you find out they're kinda like antennas for the aliens, and they're receiving information from a secret alien base on Earth, which since you now have the location of, you can launch an attack on to find out more. Okay, so that should be enough if you're interested in playing the campaign for yourself. So if you don't want spoilers, then skip to here. Launching the assault on the alien base, you find out a lot of people have been abducted and experimented on in there. Going deeper into the base, you'll encounter an alien commander with strong psychic abilities that are powerful enough to take control of your soldiers. Nope, not gonna let that happen. Also, you'll recover an alien psychic communication device called a hyperwave relay, which is a big win for Xcom and a reason to celebrate, right? Nope, because the aliens kinda get inspired by your mission to attack their base and decided to take on the Xcom base directly using mind control on some of your Xcom personnel. It's a bit of a rough mission, with even some low-ranking Xcom soldiers having to help with defense, and not really trained enough to keep up with your more experienced soldiers. Though if you prepared your troops enough for something like this, you should be able to handle it. It's a fun event in the story that I enjoyed a fair bit that's kind of a trial by fire, that once you make it through you'll feel like you can take on anything the aliens can throw at you, which is maybe a good thing as the aliens are starting to throw their big guns at you. Now while all that was going on, Drifter had become my de facto top soldier slash spy, by doing really well on all those Exalt missions I sent him to do. Like I ran out of Exalt missions to send him on because he'd helped uncover their secret base, which I sent a squad out to sort out almost immediately, as I was still a bit vengeful after their first attack. With Exalt out of the picture, I could focus on the aliens. First on the list of things to do was reverse engineer that hyperwave relay thing we got from their base, which might be a bit risky. And second on the list was try and use some of that tech we found to see if we have any soldiers with psychic abilities to counter the aliens. After messing around with the hyperwave relay and trying to start it up, we almost ran into the problem of nearly blowing up the base, but Dr. Volin is like, and luckily it starts working correctly. This is a theme you get a lot going through the game, where the characters always imply that we are messing around with stuff we don't quite understand. And if we go too far using the alien tech, it might not be a good thing for humanity.
Mark it in the history books. This is the end of an era for mankind. Even after we've defeated the remaining aliens, what then? Have we sacrificed our own humanity for a taste of their technology? And if we manage to exploit this power further, do we risk being consumed by it? Presumably just as they were?
It keeps you guessing if the alien tech we're using might somehow backfire, or do something we don't expect. Anyway, with the hyperwave relay working, it reveals a previously hidden stealth UFO. That seemed important to the aliens, so obviously I sent an interceptor to shoot it down. Going to the crash site, you'll encounter some of the more tougher aliens, and a new alien race called the Ethereals with really powerful psychic powers, who seem to be in charge of the other aliens. Another thing you find on the ship is a kind of psionic artifact called the Ethereal device, which you bring back to base. It also might be more powerful than anything you found up until this point, but you don't have any time to stress about that because now that you've discovered the Ethereal device, the aliens are done playing around as a huge mothership appears on your scanners. It's so powerful that it sends tremors around the world, and Xcom doesn't have anything strong enough to take it on. Well, yet anyway. Remember, there was research being done earlier to find out if any of your soldiers have psychic powers, and it turns out they do. Also, you'll never guess which one of my soldiers had the gift for psychic powers. Yeah, it's Drifter again. And it turns out that the Ethereal device can only be used by your most powerful psychic soldier, which was Drifter. The guy was just determined to be the hero of the story at this point, so I just went with it. Using the device allows Xcom to tap into the psychic communications of the Ethereals, including the Uber Ethereal, who has been the one leading the alien invasion against Earth. The Uber Ethereal kinda sounds a little happy that we've made progress.
At long last, you have succeeded where we have failed.
That's probably not a good sign, but with the knowledge of who's leading the invasion and his location on the mothership, you can launch an attack to take him out and finally stop the aliens. Landing on the ship, the Uber Ethereal reveals why the aliens have been attacking and experimenting on humans. All of this has been an attempt to create a perfect being of mind and body, stronger than even the Ethereals. They've been going around the galaxy and experimenting on different aliens, trying to create this perfect being but kept getting failures. That's right, all the different aliens you fought up until this point have basically just been failed experiments trying to achieve this goal. Also, the Ethereals have been letting you gain tech from them slowly while they attacked the world, so they could get humanity to their full potential and help the Ethereals with some vague destiny in the future. Now, while I'll admit this is a pretty interesting plot development, it falls a little flat because, like, did the aliens think once they explained what they were doing to humanity, we'd be like, okay, cool, I guess we'll just join you on your vague destiny thing after you've killed a whole lot of us? Or did they think they could somehow control something they'd intentionally made stronger than them? It's not very big brain thinking, which, I mean, look at them, you'd think they'd have pretty big brains, right? It's like they didn't think past this part of their plan. Anyway, I didn't come here to have a nice nice chat with ET. I came here to blow him up. Though finally taking down the Uber Ethereal causes the mothership to start creating a freaking black hole that, if left unchecked, will destroy the Earth and everything on it. Seeing what's about to happen, Drifter steps up to the plate one last time and forces his squad mates to leave without him, and sacrifices himself to steer the mothership into orbit so it can explode safely away from Earth, which finally ends the alien threat to Earth. For now. So Xcom Enemy Unknown is a game I enjoyed a lot. The tactical and strategic gameplay is really good and really sucked me in the more I played. Also, the main story and the smaller ones that happen around your soldiers are fairly engaging. It's a game I can play over and over and still have some challenging fun, especially with all the options to vary things up and the mods that are available for it. The only things holding it back are technical issues that might be frustrating if you just want to enjoy the game, and that Overwatch creep. Though for me it's worth putting up with to play the game. But I do wish Firaxis had done a little more to iron out these issues. Maybe they'll do a re-release or an updated next-gen version to iron out those issues in the future. Though it looks like they're focusing more on newer projects, which we'll see how those turn out. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. See you next time.